Happy Friday, and today we have the epic Lucy Gordon who is sharing the microphone with me. Lucy is a fantastic financial modeler who works with real estate companies, and she's come on the show today to actually talk about something that I think is really, really exciting. And we're geeking out about strategic sales processes. Now, I know I bang on and on and on about having a strategic sales process and the importance of being able to standardize and systemize your sales activities. But Lucy's putting that into real time for you in our conversation today. And she's coming to show you behind the scenes of what it looks like to have a business that is 5 years old, that has gone from her taking on projects that she would feel the pressure to over deliver, to have to go above and beyond in terms of scope to make sure that clients got the transformations that they were looking for, to really being able to communicate with clear boundaries around her sales process, to being able to prioritize and systemize her business development activity so that she doesn't sit in that position of feast or famine sales and revenue creation. And I think that today's conversation gives you a real insight into what it looks like to have a sales process that is sustainable and that is predictable, and actually the joy that that can give you. And I know that I talk about it a lot, but perhaps not in such sort of blunt terms. But when we create our own business, we didn't do that to create another 80-hour-a-week job where we were generating revenue and profit for big shareholders. What we do when we start a business is create something that is designed to A, pay us for the lifestyle that we're looking to achieve, and B, give us the ability to work around the lives that we want to create. And I think that this conversation with Lucy and I really showcases how a successful and sustainable sales process will help you do both of those things without feeling like you're lacking complete creativity or, joy in your sales and delivery process with clients. So I really, really hope that you enjoy listening to this conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. Welcome to the Selling to Corporate podcast, where we're going to be challenging your sales beliefs around selling to corporate organizations and help you increase your bottom line profits every single month. I am Jessica Lorimer, your sales expert and guide in this world of selling to corporate companies, skyrocketing your company sales and making the impact that you really want in the world. Now, don't forget, if you do enjoy the show today, please do head over to iTunes and leave us a review. But enjoy this episode, and I am really looking forward to sharing some epic sales wisdom with you. Okay, Lucy, I'm so excited to welcome you to the podcast. So please, could you tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Yes, well, thank you very much for having me. I am Lucy Gordon. I help investors and businesses manage their cash flow and optimize their strategic decision-making using financial forecasts. So my background is in real estate. I used to work for a real estate fund, and 5 years ago set up my own business, initially working with real estate investors to help them forecast investments, but then subsequently also working with lots of service-based businesses and other businesses that want to try and manage their cash flow better and forecast their returns.
I love that. And it's one of those things, isn't it? So I think you are probably one of the people who are closest to what we'd say like is a traditional business area joining the C-suite. So in real terms, for people like me who, when people say the words numbers, investments, portfolios, and a lot of other things that we don't understand, what does it mean? Like, what do you do on the day-to-day for companies?
So the majority of what I do is building models. So I'll build a cash flow forecast for, say, investors looking to invest either in real estate or looking to raise capital against their company or possibly even to sell their company at some point.
Nice.
So yeah, it was interesting. I was thinking about it the other day, thinking actually I was probably one of the only people who already worked with a lot of corporates by the time I joined the C-suite, unlike most people who are trying to get into corporate.
And I love that. And I think everybody at this point is listening to this being like, Lucy's job sounds like she gets to make Lego models all of the time. And that
Yeah.
must be amazing.
I say I do modeling, and then people are like, really? I'm like, no, financial modeling, not not anything else. Yeah. So I'm a big Excel nerd. So I sit there on Excel every day and build cash flows.
I love it. And cash flow is one of those really important things. I think it's interesting because for entrepreneurs worry about cash flow all of the time, right? Because frequently a lot of cash isn't coming in. I think it's really interesting when entrepreneurs realize that businesses look at cash flow too and prioritize that. And I think it's interesting because most people assume that businesses, well, big corporates, they make money all the time. It's really easy for them. And actually, it isn't. Like, we work in a changing market, changing economies, all of those things. And the great thing about corporates is that they want to predict how their revenue might look, how their cash flow will look. And so they can take preventative action. And I think that's a really, really useful skill that people don't consider when they set up their own business, or even when they start a company that's getting to sort of like 1 million, 2 million a year. They're just like, well, it'll take care of itself.
Yeah, as a sort of small business or a solopreneur, you feel like you are living potentially paycheck to paycheck every single month, and you're waiting for someone to pay your invoice before you can actually pay yourself. But it's the same with no matter what size the company, everyone has cash flow issues, and that's the reason so many companies fail. So you need to be able to try and predict when that money is coming in before you start being able to spend other money. Because as I say, most of them fail because they run out of cash and they go bankrupt.
That's it's terrifying because obviously I think everyone who's an entrepreneur has heard the stat around like 90% of businesses fail within the first 5 years and things like that. And most people think it's because like maybe their product wasn't good enough or their website didn't look great or something like that. And actually it comes down to you didn't sell enough and you didn't plan to have the right cash flow at the right points.
Yeah, because as a business, you could go on forever making losses as long as you've got the money to cover those losses. So, yeah,
Inspiration by Lucy Gordon, right there.
no, but when you like dig into some of the big companies, you can see like particularly lots of tech startups. They are having to raise millions and millions of pounds to get them going because for the first 10 years, they're potentially not making any money, but they've got to pay, they've got to pay for the software development. They've got to pay for these staff members. So you need to have an accurate cash flow to be able to show that. And as you're raising more money as well, and that's where I come in with a lot of my clients is that if you're raising more money, you need to show them that at some point in the future, you will be making a profit and they will get their money back and they will make a return on their money.
Yeah. I love that. And I think it's interesting because if we did that as entrepreneurs, if we looked at ourselves as essentially borrowing money from ourselves and investing in our businesses and had a clear plan of like, okay, cool, well, in 2 years or 5 years or whatever, I'm going to have this much profit and be able to take it out, people would probably make better investment decisions. And by better, I don't mean buy more things or buy less things. I mean, people would strategically invest in the areas of growth rather than being like, I'm going to spend 12 grand on a website that I didn't need before I needed, to pay a VA or to look at actual marketing that generated leads or to look at my sales strategy or whatever that looks like.
Yeah. And that's why it's important to, no matter how small your business is, just to divvy up. You don't have to create some hugely complicated thing like I do for most of my clients, but you do have to have some kind of strategy of, okay, well, actually, I need to pay myself and I need to pay the costs to host my, website and my email address, etc. And then I've got some left over, which I can then spend on, personal development or marketing or whatever it is that is going to benefit your business.
Yeah. I love that. And it's such a practical way of thinking about it. So for any of those of you who are listening thinking, I do not have a cash flow plan, you should be thinking about a cash flow plan and using those points to kind of figure that out because it is really important. And otherwise, when your business goes down the drain and you think, I don't understand why that happened, but I made 30 investments into, those low cost products that told me I'd go viral on TikTok or whatever, maybe that was the problem. Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I love it. So Lucy, tell us why you decided to join the C-suite, because like you say, you are one of our kind of like rare birds, if you like, in that you've had already worked with corporates. You come from a really cool corporate background. You'd started a business focused on cash flow. So you are uber smart with Excel and metrics and numbers and all that good stuff. what made you think actually that's something that I should be interested in?
Yeah, my issue was that I was not very good at the sales process. So I can talk about myself and how amazing I am at financial modeling. But sort of getting consistent sales and like setting up my procedures properly, I just wasn't very good at. And so I didn't have a standard template proposal that I would send out. I didn't put deadlines on my proposals. I didn't put detailed scopes together. I would just sort of just send it across to them. And then I would always find that I would get towards the end of the project when I would be super frustrated with the client because they would have asked for more and more and more. And because I hadn't been detailed enough in the beginning, I was having to over deliver to feel like I was meeting their expectations because I hadn't, as I say, put enough detail in at the beginning. So really why I joined the C-suite was to try and sort out that side of stuff to sort out, because I was getting enough inquiries and finding enough leads. It was then just, okay, how do I make this a better procedure for doing the BD call, establishing budget and timeline and things like that, putting together the detailed scope, putting together the proposal, doing sort of proper follow-up techniques with them and stuff. There's all that side of it that I was lacking. And I was just being a bit too carefree and then ending up regretting it 2 or 3 months later as I was getting towards the end of the project and thinking, oh God, this client is driving me mad with everything they're asking for.
And I think it's really hard. It's also really common because when you get into a situation where you maybe haven't got the clearest of scopes with a client, they think they can ask for more and they don't assume that any of it will be chargeable because they're like, oh, well, you said that you just do this project. And so just do it, I guess, and whatever it takes. And they can almost start treating you like an employee and you feel uncomfortable about being like, oh, actually, this is going to take me way more hours than I'd originally budgeted, or I'm going to have meetings with different people and that should be chargeable. But now I don't really know how to go back and be like, yeah, you haven't actually paid for this level of service. You've paid for these.
Yeah. And there was such a, I've been now running my business for 5 years. And in the first couple of years, just scope creep constantly. Yeah. And there were some clients where, where they would be getting so far along the line that I would say, look, in reality, this is how long I'd allocated to your project. And now it's gone 48 hours of accumulated time over that. So are you happy to pay an amount of that or whatever? Whereas now, because everything's much more detailed than what I'm writing down in the scope, I know that there are little tiny things. If they are something that's going to take 5 minutes, then I might say yes. But if it's something like, oh, please, can you add in this whole new feature? And I'll say, look, no, that's not covered in the scope, but I'm very happy to put that in. And sometimes it does come down to a negotiation at that point. It'd be like, okay, yeah, I'll put this thing in for free, but will you pay for that thing? Which is fine. But it's I wanted to get rid of that. Oh, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? You get into this cycle of saying yes to everything and then thinking, oh God, I've now spent twice as long on this project than I actually allocated and not being paid for that extra time.
Yeah. And it really impacts your sales process as well when you're doing that, because obviously the more time you're spending delivering unexpectedly, the less time you have for business development to generate that new pipeline. Even when you've got leads coming in and they're inbound, or you're regenerating old business or whatever that looks like, it can then be really difficult to prioritize those things because you're reacting almost to the delivery that's being.
Yeah. And I had quite bad boundaries with everything that I was doing in that. And that was the other reason for joining the C-suite, was to sort of establish those boundaries better for myself, because exactly as you say, there's sort of, I was very much living project to project. So I'd find a project, start working on that project and not be doing the business development while I was working on it, and then sort of, finish it, taking longer than I was expected because scope creep, and then being like, okay, now I need to start again with finding the client and doing this thing. And so again, making sure that I was being more consistent with my business development, and then also putting in those boundaries to say, no, you're not getting all of this time of mine for free. Like, I can't have endless workshops and handover days and stuff, because they all take up my time when I should be prioritizing other clients and prioritizing my BD.
And I think it's so interesting because lots of people will listen to this and resonate with the like feast famine piece that you talk about, in terms of like, sometimes you have loads and loads of delivery, no time for BD. And so you'll end up with like, oh, I'm bringing in this revenue, but then in a month's time, I have no prospects, no pipeline, because I just haven't been able to do the sales activity. But I also think a lot of people resonate with this idea of like, you almost feel obligated when you're not setting the boundary to do all the things. And I don't know whether that's more common in women, because I see it a lot with, or whether women just vocalize it more. Like, because I see a lot of women who'll say, I feel like I need to over deliver so that they get every single thing they could possibly ever want. And I've definitely been guilty of that, rather than being like, actually, here's where you've paid me to the transformation point, and this is where the support needs to end for this particular thing. If you want to go on and do XYZ or achieve XYZ, this is what you're going to need to now pay for, and not feeling bad about that, or like you're going to lose the business in some way.
No, and you've made me think of two things there. One is I have changed the way that I work to stop that. And so now I record videos of me like instructing people on how to use the models. So then they don't have to ask me constantly to come in for workshops and training sessions. And the other is, conversely to the over delivery, it's also the sort of the people pleasing element of when before I used to send someone a quote and then they would say, yeah, how about we do that for 50% less? And
No.
yeah, but because I was, in that feast and famine cycle and desperate for the work, because at that point, I didn't have things lined up, I'd be like, okay, and also a terrible negotiator, don't tell anyone. But I would say, oh, sure, yes, I'll do that, because I was desperate to have the project. Whereas now, because I've got everything in a much better system, I don't need to say yes to everything. So I can just say, if something is too low and, people trying to negotiate too hard or ask for too much and be too demanding, then I just say no. And I say, we can't work together. I've got these other projects I'm working on. My sort of lead-in time is however many weeks. So you accept the price as it is, and you accept the scope as it is, and the time frame as it is, or we don't work together and you find someone else to do it. And, that has made my life a lot easier, because I was just constantly feeling like I was under so much pressure and working so hard to bring everything through the door.
I love that though, because now you get to identify the red flags early and not work with those clients. And I think everybody talks about that, especially online. People can talk about like this idea of being able to walk away from the wrong revenue, but people often can't do that because they are in that situation where they're like, well, that's nice for you to say, Jess, but like, I have to pay the bills and I have to, feed my family and pay my mortgage and stuff. And I completely get it. But the only solution to that is get a better sales pipeline, then do better sales process work and actually cultivate it, so that next time somebody does decide to be like, oh, can you do all of this work, but for 25% of the money, you can be like, no, no, I don't want to. Go and find somebody who's prepared to take that fee and isn't as good.
Yeah. And now that I'm on the other side of that, I totally see it. But back in the day when I was scrabbling around for things, you think, no, I just have to accept everything and say yes to everything. Whereas now I think, no, if I can see you're going to be a problem client, then I'd rather not work with you, because I have all of these other prospects, and sort of get rid of them early doors rather than spending the time.
I love it. A few years ago, I told I coined the phrase a Peter client, like a pain in the ass client. And I've got a corporate client that I've worked with for years and years and years, and I really, really like them, but they were the Peter client. Like, they would say to me, oh, Jess, we don't need you to do any of this work that you've suggested. And I'd go, okay, cool. Like, but if you come back to me, it's going to cost you more because I'm going to have to work quicker and, all this kind of thing. They'd be like, no, no, no. And then a week before they wanted something, they'd be like, Jess, we need you to do this, but we want your original price. And I'd be like, yeah, no, that's just not going to happen. And it's that you have to identify those red flags and be prepared to stick to the boundaries, which is much easier when you're on the other side and you've got lots of prospects and you've got that stuff going on. But like I say, in the beginning, and when you're not in that place of cultivating a proper pipeline, it's really scary to turn around and know that you might lose the business, or they might choose to get funny about it, and you might have to communicate really, really strongly with your boundaries and transparency around what can actually be reasonably done.
Yeah. And I've actually stuck some post-it notes on the bottom of my computer screen that say that. And I haven't looked I've had them on for so long, and I haven't looked at them recently because now it's automatic for me to say, that's like outside of scope. I can, yes, I can do that, but it's going to cost extra. Or, things about time frame and making sure that everyone's on the same page. And I actually said I had a session with a client last week who, wanted this thing done super, super quickly. And I said, I could do it quickly. I could do it in 2 weeks if you wanted to. But when I ask you for a piece of information, it's going to take you a week to turn it around. So therefore,
yeah,
not through you're the problem, not me. I will turn it around super quickly, but you will take a week to respond to me. And that's the issue. That's why the time frame is 12 weeks, not 2 weeks. So as much as you desperately want it to happen by the end of October or whatever it is, it's never going to do that because you are going to take so long to provide the information. And that's a sort of, it's all those sort of things that I wouldn't have been strong enough to say before.
Yeah, it's
now
in communication, because it's really hard to say those things to people and to know that that's being consultative rather than being difficult. And I think that's a real struggle for entrepreneurs to get past that. I don't want to be difficult. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to be a challenging person for them to work with. But the reality is the client is usually wrong. And unfortunately, and I say to my corporate clients all the time, I'd love to do these things for you. However, you haven't even started on these foundational areas yet. So there's no point, because it won't end up happening. And I think corporate clients respect you a lot more when you have those conversations and when you have that consultative standpoint and discussion with them in a way that perhaps individuals wouldn't. And I think that's the interesting thing. When we look at our sales processes, we often look at them as individuals and how would we feel if someone told us no? Or how would we feel if somebody jumped into our inbox and said, can I have a meeting with you about this thing? You've never spoken to me before, but I think it would really benefit you. We look at it so much from that perspective of I wouldn't like that. I'm really defensive about it. That would really hack me off, blah, 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 blah. Corporate stakeholders and decision makers, they don't care. They're not looking at their emails at 8 p.m. at night being like, oh my God, this is going to be the life-changing thing that I do that's going to change the company forever. They're just like, whatever, I'm out for dinner. Cool. So-and-so wants to have this discussion because turns out they were right and we're not getting the information quick enough. Fine. Fair play.
Yeah, you also never know. You've reminded me that I wanted to wait until we were actually recording to tell you this, but on Friday I got an email from a very large property company that I responded to. They were asking about on my training courses, and I responded to saying, would you be up for talking about some in-person training?
Yes.
Which I would never have done before. I would have just been too scared to do that. And yeah, I ended up having a BD call with them yesterday to potentially provide training to their graduates. So it's that sort of confidence and change from where I was 12 months ago before I started doing the C-suite to sort of just having those things and knowing in my mind, what would people in the C-suite community say and what would Jess say? Definitely just ask, don't get.
Oh, I love that. And that's the thing, they can only say no. And that's fine. Whatever, you get no's all the time. The better you are at sales, the more no's you get. That's the whole goal, right? But I think that's so exciting. And the fact that you've been consultative with them and said, I think this would be a better option, means that they get to use your expertise and you demonstrate that credibility right from the beginning by saying, you could do a training course. Here are the limitations. Actually, this would be a better option for you. And this is how it's going to impact your grads. That's so exciting.
Yeah, because it's that sort of, slightly lost my train of thought, but being open to the opportunities and feeling a bit more confident with, as I say, with rejection, because I was putting off initiating those conversations for a long time with companies because I was like, if I blow it, they'll never talk to me again.
It's interesting how we think that, isn't it? I don't know that we would think it about anything else. Do you know what I mean? I don't know about you, but I online dated for ages and I never thought to myself, oh my God, if I make this hilarious joke, that person will never speak to me again. I just kind of would say it and be like, oh, well, screw it, see what happens. And it was always generally fine. And I think we have that perception around sales that if we're rejected by one person at one company, the whole thing has gone to crap. They've got some kind of file somewhere of people who've
Yeah.
did idiotic things that they'll never work with. And I'm like, that doesn't happen. It just doesn't.
No, and I think it's, obviously one of the things that you very much advocate is have multiple stakeholders at a company, because in reality, they're not all sitting next to each other saying, oh, did you get that email from Lucy? Let's definitely reject her. Like, isn't she so needy? In these big companies, they're not all talking to each other, and it just takes the right person
Yeah.
to get the right email at the right time.
I think that's awesome. And it's such a big mindset shift as well from, mindset isn't one of those things everybody knows that I talk about all that often. But I think it's interesting how your confidence in your own communication and boundaries or communication around your boundaries has changed over the last 12 months versus where you were before, because it's no longer about, oh gosh, I'm worried that if I say these things that actually I believe would be better, that they might not work with me, or that they might go ahead and, reject my proposal or whatever. Instead, it's very detached from the outcome. It's like, well, as the expert, I'm giving you my advice on what is the best solution for you. You get to choose to take that or not, and whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. I love it. And it's all come from process. We love that. So in terms of like what you think your biggest breakthroughs have been for your sales process, are there things that you think have been outside of the communication piece more valuable to your business now than when you started out 5 years ago?
Yeah, I think that just having the procedures in place for me has helped so much, because I definitely used to, and I still do waste a lot of time. We'll waste a lot of time doing various things, but yeah, wasting a lot of time trying to please people too much and trying to put together these absolutely perfect proposals and absolutely perfect BD calls, and sort of getting myself super nervous about it. Like, now, the confidence that comes from just having the standard format of, this is how I put together a scope, this is how I put together a proposal, instead of spending 5 hours on one client that rejects me, I spend 1 hour on the client that rejects me.
Yeah.
And I can focus then on doing other things and finding other clients.
It's funny, isn't it? Because standardizing things make such a difference for headspace. I always find that the processes I lose are the ones where I let my own bad habits get into play, where I'm like, oh, I'll just make this little tweak here, or I'll just do this thing differently. And because you can't predict how it's going to work out, generally when a situation doesn't pan out in the way you're expecting, you go, okay, this was the only variable that changed. So actually, that's probably the thing that screwed it up. When we're newer to sales, I think standardizing sales processes feel scary, because people think, well, I have to make it as personal as possible so that they like me, because people buy from people they know, like, and trust. And that just isn't the same in the corporate space. Or they feel that personalizing everything to within an inch of its life gives more credibility, when it doesn't. It just gives you a sales process ultimately that has a lot of potential leaky gaps that you don't know how to fix, because you can't identify what's gone wrong.
Yeah. And we've had calls in the C-suite group where people have talked about these proposals and that they've put together, and things where they're all spending hours doing it because they want it to be absolutely perfect, and you're overthinking it. And then you get a rejection that feels so much worse because you've put so much time and effort into it. And yes, you obviously want your proposals and things to be accepted, but at the same time, it's not a personal thing. It could be a personal thing, but most of the time it's just because that doesn't meet their budget or their time frame, or isn't quite right for them at that point in time. You just need to not take it personally, and step away from it and just think, no matter who this client is, this is what they're asking for. Let's just put the scope together for that and send it to them, and not try and over deliver before you've even secured them.
Yeah, absolutely. And almost not fall into like the credibility or rapport traps. Like, I think some people get so caught up in almost giving them free consultancy and creating these proposals that outline an entire plan for a client. So the client feels like, oh, well, I don't need to hire somebody to do that. We can just do it with internal resource. And it's like, when that doesn't work out, because obviously the internal resource won't do it in the same way that you'd have planned, then they almost blame you, because your plan didn't work in their eyes, they don't think, but I didn't actually hire the person who would put together the plan, who could help us execute it in the best way and actually deliver the right result.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. That's so exciting. And so what's next? What's next for Lucy Gordon taking over the world?
Well, what I'm working on at the moment is, having worked with a lot of big businesses and sort of learned what I have been doing wrong in the way that I manage my business, but also what they've been doing wrong in the way they've managed their business. I'm putting together some other pieces to help smaller businesses, because yes, at the moment, a lot of what I do is working for very big companies who are dealing with multi-million pounds.
Yeah.
And I want to take that knowledge and share it with people who are working in the, sort of 5-6 figure businesses rather than the 7 and 8 figure businesses, to try and help them there. So that's what I'm sort of working towards at the moment, to then, as I say, to focus on helping them, and also helping more people with the training courses that I do on the real estate side of things as well.
Which is exciting. So if you're busting into real estate and looking at your cash flow, then Lucy is the woman to hook up with. And you're on LinkedIn, aren't you? Is that the best place for people to go?
Yes, I only hang out on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I don't know why you would hang out anywhere else. I mean, having said that, I have got a North Yorkshire Diaries Instagram account for, we were talking about before we started hitting record on this podcast. Lucy and I were talking about what it's like living in North Yorkshire, and I have now got an Instagram account for that. It is mainly me in a bee suit, the pheasants that hop around the garden, the wild otter that I keep spotting. But those things are not they're not internet things. Like, for any interesting conversations, LinkedIn is really the only place that anyone sensible should be.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think for me, I am on Facebook, but purely as it's where a lot of other small business owners hang out and support each other. So I'm not on there to get business. I'm there for the support network. Whereas LinkedIn, I'm there to share my knowledge and to find potential clients and things like that. Because I'm working with corporates, you're not going to find them on. I didn't try, because that's the thing, is that years ago when I first started, we had an Instagram account, and we'd spend so much time doing Instagram and tumbleweed. And it was just not worth it. So yeah, it obviously depends on what it is that you do, but working with real estate investors primarily, and people and tech and service-based businesses that are on the larger scale, they're not hanging out on Instagram looking for their next financial modeler.
No, and why would you? I'm literally on Instagram looking at how do I get honey out of my beehive? Not how do I make £1 million? Why would you? Or I'm not taking retirement advice or pensions advice off of somebody popping up on Instagram. I'm like, no, I'll find somebody qualified for that. So I think it's always interesting. Lots of people just like you and me have all sat there and thought, well, maybe somebody really dedicated will be on the tube home from work, and they'll be scrolling their Instagram feed and see me pop up and think, we should hire them. They should do a talk. They should come in and deliver a workshop. And they're really not. They're doing what me and Lucy are doing. And that is basically looking at other people's holiday photos and
yeah. But people find me, but that's the thing, people find me on LinkedIn for doing what I do, because what I do is very LinkedIn friendly. It's like, people love talking about cash flows and models on LinkedIn.
I do think you should do a post with Lego models. I feel like that would be something that would get a lot of engagement on LinkedIn.
I'll have to go around to visit my nephew and
Business expense 101. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on today. I do really appreciate it. And I say to everybody who comes on, the one question that I always ask is, if somebody was on the fence about joining the C-suite, what would be your honest advice or opinion for them?
I think if you want to sell corporates, obviously if you don't want to sell corporates, don't bother doing it. No, if you want to sell to corporates but don't know how, or you're feeling lost, then you should join. I think, like the way that I've done it, not all of it was relevant to me, but I've picked and chosen the bits that work for me.
Yeah.
And I've say it's transformed from where I was 12 months ago by having that, and then also having the support from you and the group and the community.
Yeah.
It's really helpful, particularly when you are working by yourself or as a very small team. Just having other people around you that you can get advice from is invaluable.
having that accountability from other people who are qualified to point you in the direction of the resources that are going to make the difference. I think that's the difficulty online, is that you see a lot of people who are all trying to do the same thing or hit the same goals, but they're not always taking qualified advice in the first place. So everyone's kind of bouncing around from trend to trend. I think that's really nice about the community that we have, is that everybody is qualified, and people are selling to corporates all the time. So it kind of gets you out that story of like, oh, the market's really bad, or, oh, people just aren't buying right now, or, oh, it must just be this type of company that are a problem. Because you're seeing people every day who are like, yeah, no, I'm still sending proposals, I'm still doing this work, I'm still getting calls booked, and that's a really positive space to be.
Yeah, exactly.
I also really like you were like, not all of it's relevant to me. I just picked the bits that were good. Like, yes, that's exactly what you should be doing with it. Like, pick the bits in the strategies that are actually going to plug the gaps you have, not worry about having to go through another bloody 6-week program where week 1 is about your brand and week 2 is your ideal client and week 3 is your website.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is because it's not laid out like that. It is laid out in a way, okay, you want to focus on this element of things. Great, watch these couple of videos. Obviously, you could go through it from start to finish. But given that I was already starting, partway through the process, I didn't feel the need to reinvent the wheel and go back and do that early stuff. I needed to get, and say, my proposals and scopes and my procedures better, because I could already find the clients. It was sort of securing them and working with them better that I needed to improve.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it. And so where people can find you, the best place is LinkedIn, and obviously we'll pop that in the show notes as well. But if you have been listening today and you've been thinking, actually, I work with real estate companies or I work with big firms that are talking about their cash flow right now and they're not sure what to do, please do go and reach out to Lucy on LinkedIn and let her know, or introduce her to companies that might be interested in taking conversations forward with her. And equally, if you've listened to today's episode and you've had a couple of breakthroughs that you think, I don't know any real estate companies, but I do want to go and tell Lucy that actually she made me think this thing or rethink this particular problem that I'm having at the moment, please do, because it's always really nice to know when you've made an episode that's made an impact.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much. And I will see you guys in the next step.